It's an absolute pleasure to be here at Solana Breakpoint. It's been an incredible day, the energy outside, people building the future of capital markets here. So my name is Michael Lau. I'm the Senior Vice President, Group Head of Business Development at Bullish. I'm also the Chairman of Consensus, which is the flagship conference franchise of CoinDesk. After spending about a decade working in traditional capital markets, I made the switch over 6 years ago to join Bullish. At that time, it was just a prototype, 20-something people, and they said to me, hey, Michael, one day we're going to have customers. We need a customer guy. And I was like, great, I love customers. I'll be the customer guy. And in those early days, when we were thinking about who our target market was, I put together this chart that basically had 3 bars representing the difference between institutional versus retail-driven volumes. The first bar was US equity markets, 200-plus-year-old exchanges with about 80% of that volume driven by institutions. The second bar was the Chinese equity markets, 90-plus years old, about 60% driven by institutions, and at that time, us TradFi folks thought that was a retail-driven market. But then you had crypto, 10-plus years old, and best guess, probably 95% retail. And I made the point at the time that there are 2 primary drivers. The first, that people would, I think, realize that there's value in professional risk management. And the second is that our space would be more regulated over time. And those 2 factors would put us on a path to institutionalization that rhymes with history, like we've seen, for example, in other asset classes, for example, in equities. So with that being said, we decided to build Bullish on 2 pillars. The first was being a counterparty you could trust, but in a language that institutions could understand. That meant KYC, AML, being regulated, having a Big 4 auditor. And the second was then identifying a problem that they cared about, and that was finding deep and reliable liquidity. We've been on this path now for about 4 years, and we're now one of the largest institutional exchanges for crypto. But it's been a crazy adventure. In particular, back in 2023, many of you might remember, Silvergate and Signature Bank went down. At that time, we were quoting everything in USD fiat pairs, and then all of a sudden we had to pivot overnight to quoting everything in stablecoin pairs. And that's been what we've been doing since then. The majority of our liquidity and our volumes have been driven by stablecoin pairs. Now, I'm an engineer by training. I believe that innovation takes root when it's driven by causality and also on a first principles basis. And when we had to figure out what network we were going to use to provide that faster, cheaper, constantly accessible US dollar format, stablecoins was the clear choice for the institutions that rely on performance, liquidity, and capital efficiency. And it's with this mindset that we started thinking to ourselves, what other networks are there that are purpose-built for financial primitives, that have that high throughput, that have that predictable low transaction costs? And that's what led us to Solana. And over the summer, we announced a collaboration with the Solana Foundation that we would make Solana native stablecoins the primary digital asset used across Bullish's exchange and clearing services. That's powering custody, transactions, payments, settlements, and other future product innovations. There's a really cool quote that our CEO gave at the time. Solana has proven itself as rails for next generation financial infrastructure, fast, efficient, and ready for institutional scale. But that's just talk. More importantly is what you do with it. So some of you might know, for example, that over the summer, we actually IPO'd on the New York Stock Exchange at Bullish. That was an incredibly momentous occasion for us. But what's important to double-click into is the fact that we actually took $1.15 billion of those proceeds as stablecoins. And what's particularly important for this group over here is that the vast majority of that was done on the Solana network. So where do we go from here? At Bullish, we continue to push forward on this idea of institutional adoption. Since the IPO, we've gotten our BIT license and have launched in the US, and we've also recently launched our Bitcoin options trading. Our Bitcoin options product is now one of the top 5 of open interest in the world. But just switching gears a little bit, putting back my consensus hat on, I'm also extremely excited to point out that earlier this week, we announced the Solana Accelerate APAC will be coming to Consensus Hong Kong in February 2026, and I can't wait to see all of you there. And with all of that being said, there's just one line that I'll leave with you. I'm bullish. I hope you are too. Thank you.